February 1945, Germany. The Third Army was advancing through the Saar-Moselle Triangle, clearing ground as it went. A German soldier gave himself up to an infantry platoon pushing forward near a wooded ridge. That terrain had shifted control twice within the span of the previous week. He stepped out alone, both arms lifted high, his rifle already abandoned somewhere back among the trees. When he was taken in, the initial intake showed nothing out of the ordinary. Age, rank, unit details were recorded in the standard way. Nothing suggested further attention was needed at that point. He was then sent to a holding area close to a crossroads. Prisoners from multiple units were being gathered there before being moved further to the rear. Patton arrived at that same crossroads later that morning while reviewing the progress of the advance through the triangle. As was his habit, he moved through the holding area, observing the prisoners without any clear expectation of anything unusual. Then he stopped. Around the prisoner's neck, partially visible where his uniform collar had loosened, hung identification tags. They were not German. They were American issue. The shape and material left no doubt. Stamped into the metal was a medical corps marking. Patton had lost a medic 3 days earlier in that very sector. The body had never been recovered after the fighting. He turned to the officer beside him and demanded the man's identity without delay. The officer pulled the records within minutes, reviewing casualty lists from units operating in that sector during the recent fighting across the ridge. The position had changed hands repeatedly during those days of combat. The medic was Corporal Daniel Whitfield. He was 26 years old at the time he was reported killed. He had been attached to a rifle company within the formation responsible for that section of the front. He had served with that same unit since the landing in France the previous summer, during the initial invasion. His commander later described him in the casualty documentation as someone who had remained with the company through every major engagement since Normandy. He was known for moving toward wounded men under fire rather than waiting for safer moments. Some viewed it as reckless. Others saw it as the duty expected of a medic in combat. During the fighting 3 days earlier, the unit had taken that ridge after heavy combat, only to lose it again that same night during a German counterattack under cover of darkness. The sector had seen repeated exchanges like this, with neither side holding it for long. Whitfield had moved forward with a wounded group during the confusion of withdrawal after the counterattack. He never returned with the rest of his unit when they pulled back before dawn. He was later listed as missing in action, presumed dead, with no recovered remains. Patton ordered the German prisoners separated immediately from the others at the collection point and brought forward for questioning, with an interpreter, ready to translate every exchange. He did not mention the dog tags at first, even though that was the reason he had taken interest in the man. Instead, he asked calmly for a detailed account of the prisoners' positions over the past 3 days of fighting, beginning before the ridge changed hands the second time during the German counterattack. The prisoner responded without hesitation. His account was direct, lacking embellishment, as if he understood why he had been singled out and had already decided that full cooperation was his best option. He confirmed that he had been part of the force involved in retaking the ridge during that night's counterattack. During the fighting, his unit encountered an American medic who was still working methodically on wounded soldiers in a forward location that had already been overrun amid the chaos of the assault. Even as German troops closed in from several directions, the medic continued his treatment without hesitation. He did not reach for any weapon. He did not try to fall back toward his own remaining lines. Patton asked what had become of the medic afterward. His tone remained steady, controlled, and even though he already had a strong sense of what the answer would be, the prisoner replied that the medic had been killed during the firefight that eventually allowed German counterattack forces to retake the position. It was not a case of being singled out. He had been struck in the crossfire while still kneeling over a wounded soldier, attempting to drag him back toward whatever limited cover still existed in the shattered position. The prisoner added that he had taken the dog tags from the body afterward. He also took the medic's canteen and a pack of cigarettes from his jacket. His own unit had gone several days without resupply at that stage of the campaign, leaving him with almost nothing. Patton then pressed for the exact location of the body. He wanted it described as precisely as the prisoner could manage. The prisoner provided a detailed account. He pointed to a specific broken tree and a collapsed trench section nearby. The intelligence officer listening closely recognized the description, immediately as matching ground that had not yet been fully cleared of enemy resistance. Because sporadic small arms fire had been reported in that section over the previous 2 days, Patton ordered a recovery team assembled within the hour. He did not wait for Graves registration units or normal coordination channels, which would have required days under active combat conditions. Instead, he drew men directly from a nearby reserve company. They were not trained specifically for body recovery operations, but he deemed them sufficient for the task and sent them forward immediately. The prisoner was placed under armed escort and sent with them to confirm the location he had described. By early afternoon, the recovery group reached the site. They moved cautiously across ground that was still not fully secured from possible remaining resistance. They located Whitfield's body exactly where the prisoner had indicated. It lay in a shallow depression beside a collapsed trench wall, partially hidden under loose soil and debris from repeated fighting that had shifted through the position twice within 3 days. His medical equipment remained open beside him. It was still in place, as if he had been working moments before his death, much of it already used during his final efforts. Nearby lay the wounded soldier he had been treating. The bandages applied by Whitfield were still visible and largely intact. That soldier had also died in the brief exchange of fire. Patton's aide recorded that when the patrol's confirmation report came through over the radio that afternoon, Patton read it twice in silence before speaking. Then he asked a question that caught the men around him off guard, since it was not the question they expected first. Was he still working when it happened, or had he stopped to defend himself? The patrol leader was contacted again for clarification on that point. He confirmed exactly what the prisoner had already stated earlier at the collection point. The medic was located, still positioned over his wounded patient. His hands remained fixed at the bandage he had been applying at the moment he was struck. There was no weapon anywhere near him. Nothing within reach that suggested he had tried to defend himself in his final moments. No sign that he had broken away from his work, even as the danger closed in. Patton remained silent for several seconds after the radio confirmation reached him. He did not respond immediately. He simply absorbed what had been reported. Then he turned to his aide and instructed him to prepare a formal recommendation for a posthumous award. The recommendation was to recognize Whitfield's conduct in his final moments. It would state that he continued treating a wounded soldier under direct and sustained fire instead of seeking cover when he had the opportunity to do so. His actions were to be described as meeting the standard for valor under fire, regardless of his official status as a non-combat medical personnel under the rules of war. Patton then shifted his focus back to the German prisoner, who had remained under guard throughout the exchange. The man stood quietly, appearing to understand enough of what had taken place to realize that an important decision had just been made. No charges were brought against him for taking the dog tags or other small personal items from Whitfield's body after death. Although such actions were widely regarded as distasteful by soldiers who encountered them, they were not treated as criminal offenses under the prevailing standards used by either side at that time. The prisoner's testimony had matched every detail, later confirmed by the recovery team. There was no sign of deception or concealment in his statements during questioning. Instead of pursuing punishment, Patton ordered that the prisoner's full statement be officially recorded. 2 officers witnessed it, and his cooperation was explicitly documented as a mitigating factor. After that, he was processed through standard procedures like any other captured German soldier entering the system that week. His aide later confirmed that this step was intentional on Patton's part. It was not routine paperwork. It was meant to establish a permanent written link between the prisoner's account and the recovery of Whitfield's remains, ensuring clarity in the official record if the circumstances were ever questioned in the future by investigators, historians, or family members. That same evening, Whitfield's body was transferred to Graves Registration. It was processed together with the body of the wounded soldier he had been treating at the moment both men were killed in the same exchange of fire. Later, Whitfield was formally awarded the decoration Patton had recommended that afternoon. The citation described his final actions in detail, drawing directly from the recovery report and the prisoner's independently verified testimony. The German prisoner was later moved through standard processing channels in the days that followed. He was eventually sent to a prisoner of war facility, where he remained until the end of the war in Europe, roughly 3 months later that spring. Whitfield's family received his dog tags and personal effects months later through official Army procedures for notifying families of soldiers killed in action. The fact that the items had been recovered due to information voluntarily provided by the same prisoner who had taken them from the body was included in the formal notification, without further explanation. And now the question remains. Should the prisoner have faced consequences for taking the medic's belongings, even though his cooperation later helped recover the body and confirm exactly how he died? Think about it and share your view. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.